Bullied by teachers. The forgotten genius's revenge. Elijah Palmer hated Mondays. At 15 years old, he should have been enjoying his sophomore year at Westfield Academy, but instead, he dreaded every moment spent within those imposing brick walls. Elijah wasn't particularly remarkable in appearance. Average height, skinny build, with thick glasses that constantly slid down his nose, and unruly dark hair that never seemed to cooperate no matter how much he tried to tame it. His pale skin and perpetually hunched shoulders made him look smaller than he actually was, a physical manifestation of his desire to disappear. What made Elijah an easy target wasn't just his appearance, though. It was his quiet, reserved nature, his reluctance to speak up in class despite knowing the answers, and the fact that he was relatively new, having transferred to Westfield Academy only 4 months ago when his mother relocated for work. Most students simply ignored him, but the teachers, the very people meant to guide and protect him, had singled him out for reasons he couldn't understand. Elijah had a secret, though. Back at his previous school, he had been recognized as something of a prodigy in mathematics and computer science. He had even won several state-level competitions and had been offered advanced placement courses. His mother's sudden job change had disrupted all that, forcing him to start over at Westfield, where his academic history seemed to have been completely overlooked or, worse, deliberately ignored. "Get up, Palmer. You're blocking the hallway, Ms. Reynolds, the history teacher, towered over Elijah, who had been kneeling to retrieve his fallen books after someone had bumped into him. Her sharp voice cut through the corridor noise, drawing unwanted attention to him. At 45, Ms. Reynolds was known for her strict demeanor and favoritism. She wore her graying brown hair in a tight bun and peered down at students through rectangular glasses that magnified her perpetually judgmental eyes. "Sorry, Ms. Reynolds," Elijah muttered, scrambling to gather his belongings. "Speak up when you address faculty, Palmer, and straighten your uniform. You look like you slept in it," she added, loud enough for nearby students to hear and snicker. Elijah's cheeks burned as he tucked in his shirt. He hadn't actually slept in his uniform. His mother had carefully ironed it the night before, but Ms. Reynolds seemed determined to find fault with him, regardless of reality. Beside Ms. Reynolds stood Mr. Davis, the physical education teacher and coach of the school's prize basketball team. Tall and imposing with a buzz cut and perpetual scowl, Mr. Davis was approaching 50, but maintained the physique of someone 20 years younger. His booming voice and aggressive teaching style terrified most students, but he reserved a special kind of disdain for Elijah. "Late again for my class, Palmer," Mr. Davis barked, though Elijah was heading to calculus, not physical education. "That's another 0 for participation today." Elijah opened his mouth to correct him, but thought better of it. The last time he had tried to defend himself, Mr. Davis had made him run laps until he nearly collapsed from exhaustion. "Yes, sir," he replied instead, keeping his eyes downcast. The leader of this unofficial coalition against Elijah was Dr. Harrison, the chemistry teacher and department head. In his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, Dr. Harrison had a PhD in chemistry and never let anyone forget it. He was respected, feared really, by students and faculty alike for his brilliance and uncompromising standards. "Palmer," Dr. Harrison said, appearing seemingly out of nowhere, "I expect to see significant improvement in your lab work today. Your last assignment was—" He paused for effect, disappointing to say the least. The irony was that Elijah had aced that assignment. He had meticulously followed every instruction, even adding extra observations that went beyond the requirements. Yet somehow, when the grades were returned, he had received a C with cryptic comments about inadequate methodology. "Just get through the day," Elijah told himself as he hurried to calculus. "Don't give them any reason to notice you." Westfield Academy prided itself on its prestigious reputation. The sprawling campus featured Gothic architecture, manicured lawns, and state-of-the-art facilities funded by wealthy alumni. Students from privileged backgrounds filled its halls, many of them legacies whose parents and grandparents had attended before them. Elijah, on a partial academic scholarship, was an outsider in more ways than one. In calculus class, Elijah took his usual seat in the back corner, trying to become invisible. Mrs. Bennett, the calculus teacher, was distributing the results of last week's test. In her late 30s, with a perpetual frown, Mrs. Bennett was known for her difficult tests and harsh grading. "Overall disappointing performance," she announced to the class. Only 3 students managed an A. When she reached Elijah's desk, she placed his test face down with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "See me after class, Palmer." Elijah turned over the paper, expecting another unfair grade. Despite knowing he had solved every problem correctly, Instead, he found a glaring red 0 scrawled across the top, alongside the words "suspected cheating," underlined 3 times. His stomach dropped. He hadn't cheated. He would never cheat. Mathematics was the one subject where he felt truly confident. Looking more closely at the paper, he noticed several correct answers had been marked wrong, and in a few places, it appeared as though his work had been deliberately misinterpreted. Why are they doing this to me? He wondered, his hands trembling slightly. What did I ever do to them? After class, Mrs. Bennet didn't even let him explain. "I know cheating when I see it, Palmer," she said coldly. "No one solves these particular problems with that approach unless they've seen the solutions beforehand. But I don't want to hear it. This is your warning. Next time, it's straight to the disciplinary committee. You may go, the E." Cafeteria was another dreaded location. As Elijah joined the lunch line, he could feel Mr. Patel, the cafeteria supervisor and economics teacher, watching him. Sure enough, when Elijah reached for a chicken sandwich, Mr. Patel intervened. "That's for full scholarship students only, Palmer," he said loudly, though there was no such rule. "Put it back and take the vegetable soup instead." Several students turned to watch, some smirking, others looking away uncomfortably. No one spoke up for him, not even the lunch staff who knew Mr. Patel was lying. Elijah complied, taking the watery soup instead of the sandwich he had been looking forward to. He found an empty table in the corner and ate quickly, hoping to finish before any teachers could find another reason to humiliate him. His thoughts drifted to his old school, where teachers had encouraged his talents, where he had been respected for his intelligence rather than punished for it. The contrast made his current situation even more painful. "They can't even see what I'm capable of," he thought bitterly. Or maybe they can, and that's exactly why they're doing this. In English class that afternoon, Ms. Wright, a young teacher, in her first year, seemed to be the only one who didn't actively target Elijah. She wasn't particularly kind to him, but she wasn't cruel either, a neutrality that felt like a blessing compared to the open hostility of her colleagues. "For today's assignment, Miss," Wright announced, "you'll be analyzing the theme of power in Lord of the Flies. Work in pairs and prepare a presentation for next class." The students quickly formed pairs, leaving Elijah alone as usual. Ms. Wright noticed and was about to assign him a partner when Dr. Harrison appeared at the classroom door. "Ms. Wright, a word please," he said, gesturing for her to step outside. When she returned, she avoided looking at Elijah and simply said, "Palmer, you'll work alone on this assignment." Later, in the computer lab, Elijah was researching for his English presentation when the school's IT teacher, Mr. Robinson, approached. Balding and perpetually irritable, Mr. Robinson supervised the lab with unnecessary strictness. "What are you doing, Palmer?" he demanded, peering at Elijah's screen. "Research for English class, sir," Elijah replied, showing him the academic articles he had opened. Mr. Robinson's eyes narrowed. "These advanced databases are reserved for seniors working on their final projects. You're to use only the basic resources. But Ms. Wright specifically said we could." "Are you contradicting me?" Mr. Robinson cut him off. "Log out now. You've lost your computer privileges for the week." As Elijah gathered his belongings, he caught sight of another student, Jackson, accessing the exact same database without any comment from Mr. Robinson. The injustice of it all made his throat tight with suppressed anger. Walking home that evening, Elijah replayed the day's events in his mind. It had been 4 months of this treatment, gradually worsening as time passed. At first, he had thought it was just bad luck, a few teachers who simply didn't like him. Now, he was beginning to suspect something more coordinated, a deliberate campaign to break him down. His mother noticed his downcast expression when he arrived home. Sophia Palmer, a single mother who worked long hours as a hospital administrator, tried her best to be there for her son, despite her demanding schedule. "Rough day?" she asked gently. Elijah considered telling her everything about the unfair grades, the public humiliation, the baseless accusation of cheating. But he knew how hard she worked to provide for them, how much she had sacrificed to move here for better career opportunities. The last thing he wanted was to add to her burdens. "Just the usual," he replied with a forced smile. Still adjusting, his mother studied him for a moment, clearly not believing him but not wanting to push. "It takes time," she said. "You'll find your place." In his room, Elijah sat at his desk and opened his laptop, an older model, but still powerful enough for his needs. Here, in the privacy of his own space, he could be himself. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he dove into a programming project he had been working on for months, a sophisticated algorithm that could analyze patterns in large datasets. Programming had always been his escape, a world where logic prevailed and where his abilities were limited only by his knowledge and creativity, not by the arbitrary judgments of others. In this digital realm, he felt a sense of control that was sorely lacking in his school life. If only they knew what I could do, he thought, watching lines of code materialize on his screen. If only they could see me for who I really am. But they couldn't, or wouldn't, and as the weeks passed, the situation at school only deteriorated. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday, 3 weeks after the cheating accusation. Elijah had submitted a chemistry lab report that he had spent the entire weekend perfecting. He had triple-checked his calculations, formatted everything according to Dr. Harrison's exacting standards, and even included additional research that connected their experiment to real-world applications. When Dr. Harrison returned the graded reports, Elijah stared in disbelief at the glaring red F on his paper. Flipping through the pages, he found harsh comments that made no sense given the quality of his work. On the final page, Dr. Harrison had written, "See me after class for a discussion about academic integrity." After the other students had filed out, Elijah approached Dr. Harrison's desk, his heart pounding, but determination building within him. "Dr. Harrison, I don't understand this grade," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I followed all the guidelines and double-checked my results." Dr. Harrison barely looked up from his computer. "Your work was substandard, Palmer. The conclusions were clearly copied from online sources." "That's not true," Elijah protested, his voice rising slightly. "I can show you my original notes and calculations. I didn't copy anything." Dr. Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing me of incompetence, Palmer?" "No, sir, because I have been teaching chemistry for 25 years, and I know when a student is cutting corners." He leaned forward. "You may have fooled your teachers at your previous school, but here at Westfield, we have standards." Something snapped inside Elijah. "My previous teachers recognized my abilities instead of punishing me for them," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. A dangerous silence followed. Dr. Harrison slowly removed his glasses, placing them carefully on the desk. "I see," he said quietly. "Well, Palmer, since you think so highly of yourself, perhaps you'd like to explain your superior understanding to the disciplinary committee. I'm recommending academic probation for repeated instances of plagiarism and now insubordination." "But I didn't." "Dismissed, Palmer." Dr. Harrison's tone left no room for argument. Elijah left the classroom, his mind racing. Academic probation could jeopardize his scholarship, potentially forcing him to leave Westfield. While that might have seemed like a relief given his daily torment, he knew how much his mother had sacrificed to give him this opportunity. He couldn't let her down. In the hallway, he overheard Mrs. Bennett and Mr. Davis talking as he passed by the faculty lounge. "Palmer giving you trouble too?" Mr. Davis was saying. "Thinks he's smarter than everyone else," Mrs. Bennett replied. "Harrison is right. These scholarship kids need to learn their place." Elijah froze, his back against the wall just outside the door. "Did you see how he questioned my grading system?" Mrs. Bennett continued. "As if I made a mistake. These entitled kids from public schools don't understand how things work here." "Well, between us and Harrison, he won't last long," Mr. Davis chuckled. "Another month and he'll be begging to transfer out." "Or lose that scholarship," added Mrs. Bennett. "One less charity case to worry about." Elijah felt as though the floor had dropped out from under him. It wasn't his imagination. The teachers really were conspiring against him, not because of anything he had done wrong, but simply because he was on scholarship, because he didn't come from money like most Westfield students, because he represented something they resented. "They want me gone," he realized, the full weight of the situation crashing down on him. "They've been trying to push me out from day one." That night, Elijah couldn't sleep. He paced his room, turning over possibilities in his mind. He could tell his mother, but what would that accomplish? It would be his word against that of established teachers. He could go to the principal, but Dr. Blackwell was notoriously close with Dr. Harrison and the other senior faculty members. No, if he wanted justice, he would have to take matters into his own hands. Elijah sat down at his computer, a plan beginning to form. If these teachers wanted to abuse their power, they would soon learn that they weren't the only ones with power. He had skills they couldn't begin to comprehend, abilities they had dismissed along with him. Time to show them exactly who they've been messing with. Over the next 2 weeks, Elijah's behavior at school changed subtly. He became even quieter, if that was possible, but there was a new quality to his silence. Less defeated, more observant. He watched the teachers closely, noting their habits, their schedules, their interactions with technology. Dr. Harrison always left his laptop unattended during lunch period when he went to the faculty dining room. Mrs. Bennett used the same password for everything. Her daughter's birthday followed by her initials. Mr. Davis never logged out of the school's grading system, simply closing his laptop when he went to coach basketball practice. Ms. Reynolds kept detailed notes about other teachers in a password-protected file on her desktop. Mr. Robinson, ironically for an IT teacher, had atrocious cybersecurity habits, leaving sticky notes with admin credentials in his desk drawer. Each evening, Elijah worked late into the night, his fingers dancing across his keyboard as he built his arsenal. He wrote scripts to bypass the school's security systems, created dummy accounts with administrative privileges, and developed a sophisticated program that could access and archive emails without leaving a trace. He began with Mrs. Bennett's grading records. Working through a backdoor he had discovered in the school's network, he accessed her digital gradebook and found exactly what he suspected: evidence that she had deliberately altered his grades, changing correct answers to incorrect ones, lowering his scores without justification. He downloaded everything, carefully documenting each instance of tampering. Next came Dr. Harrison's emails, which revealed conversations with other teachers explicitly discussing how to force Elijah out. "The scholarship committee needs to see that he's not Westfield material," one email read. "Keep the pressure on him," said another. Mr. Davis's files contained evidence of grade inflation for athletes who could barely spell their own names, alongside systematic grade deflation for students he personally disliked, including Elijah. Ms. Reynolds's private notes were perhaps the most disturbing, detailing a long-standing practice of targeting scholarship students to maintain what she called the cultural integrity of Westfield. Day by day, Elijah built his case, collecting irrefutable evidence of misconduct, discrimination, and outright academic fraud. The teachers, confident in their power and the system that protected them, never suspected that their every digital move was being monitored by the very student they had underestimated. All the while, he maintained his composure at school, enduring their continued mistreatment with newfound patience. Each snide remark, each unfair grade, each public humiliation now felt less like a wound and more like another nail in their coffins. Just a little longer, he told himself, when Dr. Harrison confiscated his perfectly completed homework, claiming he hadn't turned it in. Everything is almost ready. The final piece fell into place when Elijah discovered the school board was conducting its annual review of faculty performance. Dr. Blackwell, the principal, was preparing a glowing report about his staff, highlighting their dedication and professionalism, while conveniently overlooking their systematic abuse of power. Elijah's moment had arrived. On a Monday morning, exactly 3 months after he had first set foot in Westfield Academy, the school board members received an anonymous email with dozens of attachments. Emails, grade records, audio recordings from classroom sessions that Elijah had secretly captured, all meticulously organized and annotated to show a clear pattern of misconduct. Simultaneously, every student, parent, and staff member received a link to a securely hosted website where all this evidence was laid out for public scrutiny, along with a detailed account of how a group of teachers had conspired to force out scholarship students who didn't fit their idea of who belonged at Westfield. By first period, phones were buzzing throughout the school. Students were whispering and showing each other their screens. Teachers were being called urgently to the principal's office. Parents were calling in, demanding explanations. When Elijah walked into chemistry class, Dr. Harrison was nowhere to be seen. A substitute teacher informed them that Dr. Harrison had been called to an emergency meeting. The same scene played out in his other classes. Mrs. Bennett, Mr. Davis, Ms. Reynolds, all mysteriously absent, all replaced by substitutes, who seemed nervous and avoided questions about the regular teachers' whereabouts. By lunchtime, the school was in chaos. The website had gone viral beyond Westfield, picked up by local news outlets, who recognized the explosive nature of the story. "Prestigious academy accused of systematic discrimination," read one headline. "Teachers caught doctoring grades to force out scholarship students," proclaimed another. Elijah sat alone in the cafeteria, calmly eating his lunch, a chicken sandwich, he noted with irony, since Mr. Patel was also conspicuously absent, and observing the commotion around him. For once, no one was paying attention to the quiet boy in the corner. They were too busy processing the revelation that their esteemed teachers had been engaged in a coordinated campaign of academic sabotage. The true masterstroke, however, was yet to come. During last period, as speculation reached a fever pitch, every computer in the school suddenly displayed the same message. a comprehensive breakdown of how the evidence had been gathered, detailing the woefully inadequate cybersecurity measures that had made it all possible. The message didn't identify Elijah by name, but it made clear that a student, one who had been specifically targeted by these teachers, had single-handedly exposed their misconduct using technical skills they had dismissed and devalued. Perhaps, the message concluded, if certain faculty members had spent less time sabotaging students and more time recognizing their abilities, they might have realized the potential threat to their own careers. This serves as a reminder that intelligence and capability come in many forms and from many backgrounds. Judging students based on their economic status rather than their merits is not only morally reprehensible, but, as demonstrated here, potentially self-destructive. The aftermath was swift and comprehensive. By the end of the week, Dr. Harrison, Mrs. Bennett, Mr. Davis, Ms. Reynolds, and Mr. Patel had been suspended pending a full investigation. Mr. Robinson resigned immediately, likely recognizing that his cybersecurity failures would become the focus of intense scrutiny. Dr. Blackwell, found to have been aware of the discrimination but unwilling to address it, was placed on administrative leave. The school board appointed an interim principal who promised a complete overhaul of Westfield's policies regarding scholarship students and academic integrity. Elijah's grades were reviewed by an independent committee which confirmed what he had known all along. His work was consistently at the top of his class. His permanent record was amended, the false accusations of cheating and plagiarism expunged. In the weeks that followed, Elijah noticed a marked change in how people treated him. Students who had previously ignored him now approached with curious questions about computers and programming. Teachers who had remained neutral during his ordeal now made special efforts to encourage his participation in class. Even more satisfying was watching the former bullies navigate their new reality. Dr. Harrison, once so proud and intimidating, looked physically diminished when he returned to collect his personal belongings, escorted by security. Mrs. Bennett burst into tears when a reporter approached her outside her home. Mr. Davis was spotted applying for positions at significantly less prestigious schools. One afternoon, as Elijah was leaving school, he encountered Ms. Wright, the English teacher, who had neither participated in the bullying nor stood up against it. "I owe you an apology, Elijah," she said, looking genuinely remorseful. "I knew what was happening, but I was afraid to speak up. It was my first year teaching, and I didn't want to cause trouble." Elijah considered her words for a moment. "Doing nothing when you see injustice is still a choice, Ms. Wright," he replied calmly. "Maybe next time you'll make a different one." She nodded, chastened, but also seemingly relieved that he was willing to speak to her at all. The most surprising encounter came a month after the scandal broke. Elijah was working in the newly reorganized computer lab when Dr. Harrison's replacement, Dr. Chen, approached him. "You're Elijah Palmer, aren't you?" she asked, her expression warm and interested rather than suspicious. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, cautiously. "I've been reviewing the advanced placement applications and your name came up. Your previous school had recommended you for AP Computer Science, but it seems that recommendation was overlooked when you transferred here." Elijah nodded, unsurprised by this revelation. "Well," Dr. Chen continued, "I'd like to correct that oversight. Based on your academic record, your actual record, that is, you're more than qualified. In fact, I'd like to discuss the possibility of you joining our competitive programming team for the state championships next month." For the first time in months, Elijah felt a genuine smile spread across his face. "I'd like that very much, Dr. Chen." That evening, as he walked home, Elijah reflected on everything that had transpired. The teachers who had tried to break him had instead unwittingly pushed him to develop skills he might otherwise have left dormant. Their cruelty had forged in him a resilience and resourcefulness that would serve him well throughout his life. He had won, not by becoming like them, petty, vindictive, abusing power for personal satisfaction, but by using his intelligence to expose the truth. He hadn't sought revenge for its own sake, but justice that would protect future students from experiencing what he had endured. When he arrived home, his mother was waiting with a mix of concern and pride on her face. The story had been impossible to contain, and though Elijah had never explicitly admitted his role in exposing the scandal, Sophia Palmer knew her son well enough to connect the dots. "The school called today," she said, watching him carefully. "They want to offer you a full scholarship for the remainder of your time at Westfield." Elijah sat down beside her, suddenly feeling the weight of the past months lifting from his shoulders. "What did you tell them?" "I told them I'd discuss it with you." She took his hand. "Elijah, I'm sorry I didn't realize what was happening. You should have told me." "You had enough to worry about," he said, "and I needed to handle it myself." She studied him for a long moment, seeing not just her son but the young man he was becoming. Strong, principled, unwilling to be defeated by injustice, but also unwilling to be corrupted by it. "Are you sure you want to stay at Westfield?" she asked. "We could find another school somewhere you could start fresh." Elijah thought about the new administration, about Dr. Chen and the programming team, about the students who now looked at him with respect rather than indifference. He thought about the message his departure would send versus the message his continuing presence would reinforce. "I'm staying," he said firmly. "Westfield needs students like me, students who don't come from wealth and privilege, but have something valuable to contribute anyway. Besides," he added with a small smile, "I've already put in the work to change things. I'd like to be there to see it through." His mother squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening with unshed tears of pride. "Then that's what we'll do." The following Monday, when Elijah walked through the doors of Westfield Academy, he held his head high, his shoulders straight, his steps confident. So the hallway that had once felt like a gauntlet now seemed like just a hallway. The classrooms just rooms where learning happened, rather than arenas for humiliation. As he passed a bulletin board, he noticed a new posting, a code of conduct for faculty, prominently featuring policies against discrimination and academic dishonesty, alongside a statement affirming the school's commitment to evaluating students solely on their merits, regardless of economic background. Beneath it was a sign-up sheet for the competitive programming team, with his name already listed as team. Captain Elijah Palmer smiled to himself as he continued to his first class. He had come to Westfield as an outsider, singled out and targeted by those who should have been mentoring him. He had endured months of deliberate cruelty, designed to break his spirit and force him out. Instead, he had transformed the institution itself, using the very abilities his tormentors had tried to suppress. He hadn't just survived their bullying, he had systematically dismantled it, ensuring that future students would be protected from similar treatment. In the process, he had discovered strengths within himself that might have remained dormant. Under more favorable circumstances, resilient, strategic thinking, moral clarity, and the courage to stand up against injustice even when standing alone. The teachers who had tried to destroy him had instead created their own downfall, undone by their arrogance and their fatal underestimation of the quiet, unassuming boy they had marked as an easy target. Elijah took his seat in his first class of the day, opened his notebook, and prepared to learn. Not just the subject material, but also the complex lessons about power, justice, and integrity that his unique experience had taught him. Lessons that would shape not just his academic career, but the man he would become. As the new teacher began the lesson, Elijah caught the eye of a nervous-looking freshman sitting alone in the corner, clearly new and uncertain. He offered the younger student a reassuring smile and made a mental note to check in with him after class. After all, if his ordeal had taught him anything, it was the importance of standing up not just for yourself, but for others who might not yet have found their own strength. That perhaps was the most valuable lesson of all.